So Ashley, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Jessa.
What I'd like to start with is sort of what brings you to this work. Why is it? Why is it
You
you work
know,
in this field, you know?
I love to tell this story.
Oh, good.
So, when I was just out of grad school, I wanted to do private practice. I was considering doing private practice, and I interviewed with this woman who was starting a group practice in Austin. And she asked me about my population. I was so green. I was like, oh, I don't know. I had my intention about who I wanted to see, but I wasn't sure what was going to work. And she gave me the most lovely piece of advice. She said, your population will find you as long as you're open to
Yeah.
accepting whoever it is. And so basically don't get fixated on who they are or try to control who's coming to you. Yeah, you can do that a little bit. And so I joined the practice and I started seeing clients and I started to notice that there was a consistent theme. I was starting to see a lot of men who had psychogenic erectile dysfunction, and that was really impeding conceiving or dating or maintaining their long-term relationship. And so taking that advice, I just leaned in and started piecemealing my training together. At the time, there was no one school for sex therapy education in Texas. And so I was traveling all around the country and eventually got it a
Yeah.
couple years later. So it took a while.
So that's still a large part of what you're doing in terms of the niche that has found you?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I mostly
Okay.
almost exclusively do sex therapy with
Yeah.
couples and individuals.
Yeah. All right. So on this topic today about sex after baby, I mean, it's such a specific time of life, right? And specific segment of sex therapy work is helping people who've had this, gotta say, disruption to their
Yeah,
intimate
yeah.
life, right? Like, what do you hear from people in terms of what happens? Let's especially say first baby, right? Going
First
from, oh, we're
baby.
a couple, just the two of us, to adding a baby. What are the kinds of complications that show up that people maybe don't even expect?
Well, that the surprise is
Yeah.
one of them that, I think they have like a logical understanding of we're going to be without this part of our relationship for a certain amount of time. And it might be a significant if, couples who've only been married for a little bit, 6 weeks is what doctors usually say is when a person is cleared. But what I have found is emotional readiness and psychological readiness do not go on that same timeline. And so it's really helping the couple understand, the level of communication required between the two of them. 6 weeks does not mean at 6 weeks you're good to go. 6 weeks, I help them think about like a framework of 6 weeks is when you can start thinking about it now.
Ah,
Yeah, and really it's very dependent on what the birth experience was like
mm,
too. So there are a lot of mitigating factors that can make that 6 week window much, much longer, especially if it was scary, traumatic, sudden. Things like that can really impact how the couple is able to connect, especially how the mom is able to connect and feeling, being thrust into this new role of motherhood too. So
yeah. Yeah.
lots of levers.
Right. So talk a little bit more about what could happen in the actual birth of these experiences. What impacts that six week window? I love what you're saying is that's the time to first start thinking about it and talking about it, not expecting that, okay, it's been exactly 6 weeks for having sex tonight.
Yeah,
But like
yeah,
what
exactly.
kind of stuff go into readiness for somebody to resume sexual experience? And maybe we're specifically talking about, a mother who's given birth, but
Yeah, for a mom who's given birth, if we're talking, especially with first-time moms, I've been a new mom 3 times. First-time moms, it's really super scary because you have no idea what to expect. Everything is brand new, and there's a lot of anxiety and preparation going into having a baby. And when things go off the rails or don't go the way that we want them to, and because a lot of births are now medicalized, that makes interventions and surprise things happening. And so there's always this level of beyond just let me get my bearings to let me grieve for possibly the process that I did have. You
mm,
know, a lot of moms, I hear this with wanting a natural birth or wanting to deliver vaginally, but end up having to have a C-section and feeling like they've lost control of their body. They didn't have autonomy to really advocate or do the thing that they wanted to do because doctors are saying, okay, now this is emergent situation. And that in and of itself can be traumatic. And, when we're dealing with trauma, that takes a lot and the body is holding that. And so they may be ready to start thinking about that, being intimate and connecting with a partner during that time. So let me tell you a little story real quick about my
Okay.
first birth. I remember being so upset because, much of this was an example of what I had to deliver early with my first baby. And I was getting an epidural, which was way off the grid of
Not
what I
on the birth
expected.
plan, right? Yeah.
And my husband fainted when he saw that. And for some reason, I got so angry. Was like, are you kidding me? This is not about you. And so we had that whole process to get over. Like, what is happening? I was terrified and scared, and you fell out. And so
Right.
just little tiny things like that can cause little ruptures. And you got to talk about those things, or else you're going to hold that resentment and you have to process the experience of the birth and, how it was a very individual or scary thing, or maybe it was a connective thing, but it still needs to be processed by the
Yeah.
couple.
Yeah. Well, on that note, I'll share a personal story too, because with my first baby, actually with all three, I had tearing and sutures and then had pain with sex for a long time. And I did not expect that and felt like, what is wrong with me? I mean, I sort of felt broken, even though it's sort of a natural thing
Yeah,
that can happen. And it's like, there were repercussions from from the birth itself for a long time that can make a big
yeah,
difference, right?
that's really true with the tearing and the medicalization. Also, women with C-sections, there's a lot of they are very desensitized after that for a very long time, and that can extend beyond just where the scarring is, and even further, and create complications. That And the unfortunate thing is because it happens so often, it is almost normalized, but it's not normal.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's scary. It should still be treated as, an intervention and as a scary thing. And, help women should be helped to understand or understood that this can have lasting issues and complications, but there are things that we can do about it. We shouldn't just expect ourselves to just heal and be back to normal
Right.
100% a few
Right.
weeks later.
So we've got the physical experience of the birth, which can certainly have repercussions, and it's a lot to go through, right? There's the potentially emotional or traumatic aspects if even if it just isn't what you wanted, right? The grieving of
Mhm.
that, but sometimes it's really scary. You got the connective
Mhm.
part you brought up if your husband passes out when he's got the easy job, right? So that's about the birth itself. But then I'm thinking there are also things about just the role changes, right? Like come
Yes.
home with the baby. Talk a little bit about what else changes at home,
Yeah.
after the birth itself.
It's one of those things, how people say, if you know, you know. And it's really hard to help and prepare new moms for the significant shift and, especially the mental load that they're now taking on. Working with couples who are expecting, I often help them see that there is a hierarchy and help them organize their lives so that they can better prepare for introducing a baby. Is mom takes care of baby, dad takes care of mom. That way they know what they're doing and they're not both trying to handle baby's needs and someone's
Mm,
needs aren't getting met. And oftentimes I'm telling fathers that might mean putting your expectations and desires for physical connection to the side because mom is providing so much of her body and her energy to the baby and she needs help. And if you want to talk about having sex and 6 to 8 or 9 weeks later, then you need to do the things that prepare for that make her feel like you're someone that she wants to turn to and can count on. And that looks like picking up the groceries, doing the laundry, massaging her feet, and still building connective touch where it's not on the partner, on the wife and the mom to be the giver of these things. You know,
yeah.
that can be really helpful for the couples to conceptualize. And I don't think I feel like there's a lot of people and a lot of counselors who might feel uncomfortable giving such directive information and For me, obviously I will say that this works if you do it this way, but it may not work for you. You'll find what balance works for you. I know with my third baby, I went right back to work and my husband was a stay-at-home dad. So he was the primary caregiver. And so we had to adapt in different ways. So,
Right. Right. And I mean, I do remember my kids are older now, so it's just, I have to think back, but I remember it was hard to eat and shower in the same day with a new baby,
yes.
right? Like it
Yep.
was kind of amazing to actually get a shower or,
Mhm.
um, if like my husband was back at work or something like that. So that I don't know that people anticipate quite the demands, the physical job of taking care of a baby and of trying to get through a day.
Yeah.
Um, you know,
And especially if we like look back historically, or we can also, what is it? What is the word I'm looking for? Where you kind of like make it the fairy tale or kind of see it through rose-colored
oh yeah, yeah,
glasses.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, of like maybe how your parents did it or how your mom did it. And we have to allow for just the time that we live in, like the different era, of when we were raised versus what the demands are on us now.
Yeah, and how somebody presents on the outside, right? Wow, my best friend is having such an easy time. That doesn't necessarily mean that's true, or that
Yeah,
those first
exactly.
6 to 12 weeks were easy or.
Yeah, or that your mom did it,
Right,
and
right.
so what was the big deal? Well, we didn't know if mom was screaming on the inside.
Exactly. We
She
don't
was
know how
just,
much suffering there was. Right,
no, no, we
right.
don't.
And I'm imagining too, there could be issues around, who is doing what or who's responsible for what, or somebody
Mhm.
going back to work, or who's earning the money, or who's supposed to be getting up in the middle of the night with the baby, or, this could
Mhm.
bring up conflict, frankly, or differences
Yeah,
of around expectations, right? That could get in the
yeah.
way too of intimacy.
Introducing that third person, that little person to a marriage and a relationship really does put it to the test as far as, taking the couple to task on their communication. And, you can say it all day long, communication, 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 but what that looks like and what that means isn't often spelled out or really clear and concrete to most couples.
Yeah.
Um, when it comes to talking specifically about resuming sex after baby, um, that we do have to help. I have to help guide couples into having that conversation, moving away from sex being a need instead of saying like I need this to I want this and why I want this. I want to, connect. I want to feel close to you. I want to feel still important to you are often the things that I hear. And one of the things that I find is that if we can help the couples get creative about what that looks like, it doesn't always have to be P and V or the way that they used to do it, for it to be connective and enjoyable, then that can go a long way. I know a lot of couples ask, young couples especially, how much is normal? How often should we be doing it to be
Mm,
normal? Because now we have this baby and maybe once a week. And then even then I don't think one partner's enjoying it. And again, really educating them because they see what's in the media, they see
right.
what their friends are doing or hear, what's going on in the world, and they think they're getting the full picture. But the reality is, it's not a matter of quantity, it's a matter of quality. It is about co-creating an experience that is enjoyable for both of them, and that can look like anything. There is not a test. That does mean probably broadening what is qualifies as sex for that
Right.
particular couple. And that definition can be fluid throughout their relationship. And,
Yeah.
there might be seasons of things. We only do this type of thing, during the late stages of pregnancy when, a woman is very uncomfortable, perhaps can't get in all the old fun positions. And so they have to be adaptive. And, if giving them permission to explore those things and talk about things differently seasonally helps people understand because a lot of times people feel like they don't want to let go of something that was really enjoyable. They fear the loss of that.
Right. Right. Well, they may have to adapt.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if the 6 weeks guideline is about when you might start to think about it or talk about it. I mean, obviously that doesn't mean everybody's raring to go, right?
Right.
But at a
Right.
certain point, I mean, mom takes care of baby, dad takes care of mom. at a certain point, like, who is taking care of dad? Right? Like, where does
Yeah.
that person's needs start to come back? And again, desires,
Yeah.
not just needs, right? Come back into play. How and I imagine this timeline is different for different people, but when does it start to be a little bit problematic that there's so much focus maybe on the baby and lack of attention to the couple's intimate relationship?
Yeah. And that who is taking care of dad is, you know, never said like that, but it's always suggested like, wait, well, then who's taking care of me? And, the reality is it's never going to always be 50-50.
Right.
This is going to require dad possibly relying on family and friends more than he would have in the past, or perhaps giving in other ways that maybe they're not used to the family to unburden mom. I really like Emily Nagoski's accelerators and brakes idea when it comes to um, creating a sexual experience that is enjoyable for both partners. That really helps put things into context for dads and for fathers, giving them something to actually do to help with that. When I see the problems arise of like, okay, this is not too long, is really, measurably when the baby doesn't need mom so much. And we're talking about when we're done nursing, when, we're getting out of diapers, when, 18 months, when the child is ready to possibly start being in a daycare or school, being socialized and things like that. And assuming this is not a child that has really high special needs, which is a completely different,
Right.
topic and story. Um, and processing with mom a lot of the times about what is the fear about letting go, like not letting go, but what is the fear about pulling back a little bit and refocusing your attention over here. And oftentimes it does come from a deeper place. It's not I don't like dad anymore, I don't want to do that anymore, or I love this baby more than I love my partner, my spouse. It's more of an internal personal conflict that they're dealing with.
Yeah, and
Moms have a
18
lot of guilt.
yeah, 18 months seems like a long time
It does.
to not tend to your intimate connection with your partner. But I don't think that's that unusual to, I do remember trying to think, it was every baby. Certainly my first one, it felt like my entire calling was to take care of this young creature. And
Mhm.
it's like I was thinking of my husband, don't be another child that has needs of me. Let me focus on this thing that I need to be doing. And that really wasn't fair. I mean, I wish I'd gotten more help at the time. Uh,
Yeah.
they're really, how do you talk to moms about the importance of maintaining, not just having sex, but like really investing in your intimate relationship with your partner?
It really starts with trust. I like what you said about, getting more help. And a lot of times I see moms resistant to letting dad do it their way, or letting dad do it and not maybe get it right. Really, there's some really funny memes about like how dads send their kids to daycare. Like,
Yeah.
and that's fun and funny. But again, if you truly are loving and trusting of your partner, we have to trust that they are just as good of a parent as you are. They're going to do it differently, but that doesn't mean that different is bad.
Yeah.
And letting go of some of that control in the parenting choices is often the thing that moms have to kind of get over. They have the whole scenario of what if this happens, what if this happens, but meanwhile they're controlling the situation, they're also building resentment about not getting the help that they want and need, and they're infantilizing at worst their partner, who by the implied assumption that they're not good at being a dad.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I'll say to couples is that I do believe this. The best gift we can give our children is a really great relationship with our partner.
yeah.
So that
Yeah.
for moms who are feeling like, wait, what about the baby? It's like, really, it's so important to tend to this so that the child is raised, in an environment with this thriving relationship as a model and as a container.
Absolutely. And, again, that's a good point that we can make is let's model these great relationships for our kids. We don't want them to grow up and say, well, you didn't really give me a good example of a healthy marriage, or didn't have a good example of this or that. Or, raise our daughters and sons with the idea that they have to be in charge of this, or they can't do this other thing. And so might feel uncomfortable to some people because that we start talking about challenging gender roles and things like that. And
Right. So, what are some ideas about how couples can communicate about this, whether it's about a partner's need to resume some intimacy or the mom's obstacles to that, their challenges or the things that might be making this take longer than 6 weeks? Or, how do these couples open this dialogue so they can kind of be on the same team about it?
I like to give couples really clear exercises and ways to share what they're feeling. The I feel I need, or when this happens, I feel this. And, also giving them permission to talk in metaphors. If I were to do this, how would that go? If I were to say this, how might you take that? That way they are still testing the water and they are slightly communicating what it is that they're feeling, and they're not just shutting down, because shutting down and not saying anything is actually the one of the worst things that a couple can do.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to fight about it. I know that people might they don't want to fight, especially when they have a baby. It's Hollywood's idea that right after baby is a beautiful magical time. Real life, it is not rainbows and butterflies. It's real, dirty, grimy, messy, chaotic. And in that chaos, that's where you find your footing. And the footing is really best given with those concrete ways to communicate.
Yeah.
Setting aside a few times for that works best for communication. Maybe having a face-to-face talk in the evening isn't possible, because when is evening if the baby's waking up every 4 hours?
Right.
Maybe it's text messages, maybe it's a date.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking back to we had an anniversary right after, just a couple months after our first baby was born, and I remember feeling very anxious about leaving that baby and the guilt of getting dressed to go to dinner,
Yeah.
leaving the baby with a family, with my mom. That's not crazy, but I
Right.
still felt like, oh, should I be doing this? This is so bad. This is so wrong. And that remembering that I am entitled to enjoy my life, and I'm entitled to do things other than just take care of the baby is a bit of a shift and a challenge. And asking mom to leave space for those uncomfortable feelings, the shame and the guilt, those will come up, and that there's a place and a time to deal with those things, but we
Yeah.
shouldn't just be actively avoiding those feelings at all costs.
It also seems like a time, I mean, this always applies, but an important time to remember to be curious about each other's experience and to value each other's well-being, and remember that you're trying to make this a win-win, in a
Yeah.
relationship and a sex life that works for both people. And rather than getting upset or defensive or taking it personally or attributing a lot of intent, but to really seek to understand each other and meet there.
Yeah.
I'm always trying to get couples to remember they're on the same team working towards mutually satisfactory
Yeah.
outcomes, and this is a very challenging time, but they can still do that.
And every rupture is an opportunity for deeper connection, for
Yeah.
taking the relationship and the knowledge of your partner to an even deeper level than you had before.
Yeah.
There's a lot of depth that is possible right after a baby if the partners are willing to dive.
Yeah. And what would you say, what are some signs that maybe people should reach out for some help, seeing a therapist or something like that? Like, but, because I always want to encourage people to get help sooner rather than later, but
Yeah.
like, what are your sort of signs that maybe they'd want to consider that?
I think if they are expecting a baby, just anytime during pregnancy, just to kind of ensure that they might have the foundational things that they need to introduce a baby. That's always good. So literally just pregnancy, if you're experiencing, because you are integrating a new life into your life or your couple life. And, after a baby, I don't encourage going to therapy right after, because you have so much going on, and that's
Yeah.
super intense and a lot of care to be given and taken. So around, like, I would say around the 3-month mark, if they're still starting to experience a high level anxiety, especially a high level of anxiety around your partner or your partner's request, or feeling like oh my gosh, they're coming close, they're going to anticipate, they're going to ask, they're going to initiate, and I just don't want to. I don't even have the bandwidth to say no in a nice way. That is a good sign to have someone help you talk about those things.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, please, people that are listening, get help sooner rather than later, because it just is, I don't know, it's easier to get back on track.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
introducing introducing a baby, having a baby in pregnancy, I think is one of the few ways that therapy can inoculate.
Right.
Usually therapy is very reactive. Like you have to have the event, the scary traumatic thing happen before we can help you.
Yeah.
But here, when we're anticipating a marriage, we're anticipating a baby, there are things that we can do to help couples really find solid ground.
Yeah. Yeah. Love that. So where can people find you, and how, in what ways do you work with people so you get a chance to?
I work with people in two ways. I am a therapist. I have a clinic at Bellwether Counseling in North Austin, Round Rock area. And I have several clinicians, many of whom are sex therapists or in their sex therapy training. And for counselors and therapists who are considering that as maybe a niche or just want to get more information, I also educate counselors. I have a school, Talk Sex Institute, that has as you want, it has a full certification program, also has one-off classes if you just need to get the CEUs and you're tired of the same old things, you want to try something more interesting. I know it's always fun and interesting to talk about sex, even if it's not your niche, and it's a good way to get through CEUs without.
Well, let me just second that. I mean, I just think it's so important that therapists have
Mhm.
training in this, even if they aren't going to get fully certified like we have.
Absolutely.
It's just, it comes up, it's a natural part of life, and having some training in that is
Super
so
important.
important. Yeah.
And I want to share this is, when I was writing my dissertation, I did come across this, that most of our clients already think that we're experts in sex, even if we've never had any training. So you're a sex therapist, even if you don't know it. So you don't have to realize it. Your clients
Right.
think that you are.
Right.
So
Great. Well, thank you so much.
thank you so much, Jessa. This was really fun.